Okay, hello and welcome to the video. My name is Wade Smith, and I think this is recording, although it didn't give me the feedback to let me know it was recording. There it goes. Okay, they changed the format a little bit. All right, so this video is about Magic the Gathering pre-modern format and why certain decks do not work the way they're purported to and alleged to work. Namely, the Dreadnought deck actually sucks, even though people think it's one of the best decks in the format, and it's absolutely terrible against mono black control, and it's also absolutely terrible against Sly and against Jank, which are old school decks that are legal in the pre-modern format. Like for example, my Moneyball or mono black control deck that I've designed will hose the living tar out of the best possible Dreadnought deck. All right, so it's like Dark Ritual, Phyrexian Arena, Hypnotic Spectre, Nantuko Shade, Royal Assassin, um, Icy Manipulator, Duress, Hymn to Turak, Diabolic Edict, uh, Chainer's Edict, and 18 Islands. And I'm missing something else that I forgot. What did I forget? Because I've actually at 62 cards and haven't trimmed it down to exactly 60 cards just yet. But that deck will absolutely run circles around Dreadnought because it has so many answers to the Dreadnought itself, and it has so many answers to his counters, namely the heavy discard. And Nantuko Shade races really fast. If your Dreadnought either dies in your hand or dies on the board, Nantuko Shade and Hypnotic Spectre race just about anything. All right. The main problem that Mono Black Control has is against Sly or Jank because of all the burn in Sly and Jank. All right. But what you do is you build your sideboard around you four engineered plagues, hose goblin heavy decks, and hose elf heavy decks. But then the rest of your sideboard is the hose burn. So you take out the Phyrexian arenas and you put in drain lives, and you can probably take out in this case the icy manipulators and put in. This is going to sound stupid, but believe it or not, it's 2-for-1 card advantage. Touch of Death, because Sly and Jank run a bunch of one toughness creatures, including Jackal Pups and Brass Man and so forth. Touch of Death is really strong against those because it kills the creature, you gain one life, and you draw a card. And if you Touch of Death a Jackal Pups, your opponent loses one life. All right. So, Touch of Death is actually, believe it or not, a good card. And for example, Gush is actually usually a very bad card, even though it was once on the banned and restricted list, even in Vintage. Gush is almost never worth playing. It gets played by so many pro gamers, and it the reason I say it's almost never worth playing is because it hoses your own mana base so hard that you never recover from it. Just the other day, I was watching a pro gamer who lost a best of three match against two best of three matches in consecutive games playing his Psychotog deck, primarily because he gushed and dazed so many times that he had no mana. And the other player had 10 lands in play, and he had two lands in play, and he got swarmed by I think it's Decree of Justice on one of the matches, and then it was definitely Deranged Hermit on the second match. The guy just ran over him with two squirrels with a survival of the fittest deck that used Genesis and Squee, but did not have recurring Nightmare in it. It was a red green survival of the fittest deck, and he just ran right over the Tog player like it was a joke. All right. Um, because the Sakatog player's deck did absolutely nothing except draw cards and discard cards, which is really the only thing the Dreadnought deck does. And it's only got one win condition in it, either Dreadnought or Psychotog. You cannot win reasonably at this game with only four copies of one creature in your deck. Is the first problem. It's about math. How many threats are in your deck, and how many answers to your opponent's threats are in your deck, and how many counters or discard spells you have. Good counters or discards. And let me give you some examples. Foil is a very bad card because it costs you three cards to counter one spell. It should never be in your deck. Hymn to Turak is a ridiculously good card, and it belongs in every deck that has black in it in pre-modern. It should be the first black card in a pre-modern deck. If you splash black for anything, Hymn to Turak should be the first card, and Hypnotic Spectre should be the second card in the deck. All right? Because Hypnotic Spectre is probably the second best creature in the entire format. And the best creature in the entire format is still Morphling, not Dreadnought. Dreadnought is not even supposed to be playable. They made the Phyrexian Dreadnought as a joke. All right. And so people trying to make their deck around Phyrexian Dreadnought are basically you're duressing yourself every time you stifle a Phyrexian Dreadnought. And okay, let me give you another example of a very good creature. Manowar. And some commentator on a forum the other day said that he had never even heard of Manowar because the card's so old. And I'm like, do you realize that bouncing your opponent's creature, especially their biggest or most recently played creature, back to their hand, time warps them for 2 turns because of summoning sickness? Because if you bounce their creature back to their hand, they don't get to use it to attack for another 2 entire turns, and they have to repay its mana cost, which is really effective if you're bouncing their only win condition, like such as Dreadnought or Psychotog, back to their hand, or if you're bouncing their biggest win condition, such as well, let me just pick a card. Let's say if they had a Jajam Jin, which is probably the most expensive card in the format. You could bounce their Jazam Jin, and they have to pay 4 mana to replay their Jazam Jin. And by the time they're ready to replay it, you could counter it, because maybe you didn't draw the counter the first time. So the AI and the people on this forum that I was on were telling me that I needed more card draw in a deck that I had done, in a Morphling deck that I had done. And I was like, you absolutely do not need more card draw, because I had 4 Thieving Magpies, and I had a bunch of built-in bounce creatures, including Manowars and Echo Tracers, that disrupt the opponent's tempo and time warp them 2 turns every time you play a creature. All right. And I had Massacre for cleaning up elves, and I had Powder Kegs for cleaning up elves and goblins and tokens. All right, depending on what the opponent's deck is doing. And I still had 12 counters in the deck. I was like, the card draw is the Thieving Magpie. I've actually beaten top 100 in the world players before by attacking 3 times with an Echo Tracer and 14 times in the same game with a Thieving Magpie and beating him. That's how I won with a similar deck one time against a top 100 player in the world. So the deal is, you need more threats in a control deck. You don't need fewer creatures in a control deck. You need more creatures in a control deck. Because if you don't have more threats, then the mono black deck is going to beat your blue deck. Because Hypnotic Spectre and Hymn to Turak hose instants. You can't hold on to instants against Hymn to Turak and Hypnotic Spectre and expect to win. You need a permanent source of card draw, namely Thieving Magpie, on the board. Otherwise, you will never get to play the Morphling, because it's going to get discarded from your hand before you get to draw it, before you get to that much mana. All right, and similarly, against weenie decks, you need more creatures in your deck, because instants are not good against creatures, and they're not supposed to be good against creatures. There's a very few number of instants that are intentionally designed to be good against creatures, namely Incinerate and Diabolic Edict. And I think Terminate's also in the format. I'm pretty sure Terminate is in the format. Yeah. All right, so Terminate's good as well. But those are the only 3 instants that are actually good against creatures in the entire format. Snuff Out costs you 4 of your own life. So, if you do that, you die 4 turns faster while you have Phyrexian Arena out. So I don't like Snuff Out, at least not in a deck that uses Phyrexian Arena. Anyway, this was about card advantage. So cantrips that only draw 1 card but look at 2 or 3 cards, are actually not that good. It's true that they fix your mana base sometimes, or they might put the cards from the top of your deck into the bottom of your deck or shuffle your deck or whatnot. But uh, Portent and Impulse are actually, the way they're read on the card, you have an option to shuffle your deck. You should never shuffle your deck because that actually puts the deck back in a random order again. All right. And defeated the purpose of you cantripping, and the alleged purpose of you cantripping in the first place was to get to your threats or your answers faster, right? Supposedly. Well, what if your cantrip wasn't a cantrip? What if your cantrip was itself a threat or an answer? Such as Exclude, a very, very, very good and underrated counter magic card. It's 2 colorless and 1 blue, counter target creature spell, and then draw a card. So it's 2 for 1 advantage for only 3 mana. That's better than Fact or Fiction. Fact or Fiction will almost never net you more than 2 cards, and it costs 4 mana and does not counter anything. Exclude is almost always better than Fact or Fiction, and it costs less mana to play. Good old-fashioned Counterspell is probably one of the best cards in the format because Mana Drain is banned in Pre-Modern, and so is Force of Will. But running 4 copies of Foil in a Pre-Modern deck is foolish because you are losing 3 cards every time you counter something with Foil. You're literally Mind Stab throwing yourself every time you cast Foil for its alternate cost. In the words of one of my friends, Roland, who used to own the local card shop years ago, I would never put that card in a real deck. Do you understand how misunderstood this card is? It is a crap rare or whatever it is, or uncommon. I think it's an uncommon, but it's a crap card. It is bad. It does not belong in a control deck. The reason people play Gush is they're throwing away 2 islands to their foil. And then they're putting themselves 6 turns behind schedule on average on their mana curve because after your opening hand, it takes 3 turns on average to draw 1 land. Unless you're drawing a bunch of cards. But you're gushing to throw away 2 lands that are already on the battlefield. And then you have a 2/3 chance of drawing a 3rd land that you're going to replay. So what you have done is you've screwed yourself over by 6 turns of mana development or so, and you threw away 3 cards to counter 1 other card with foil, or they daze and then they foil. So you dazed, you time warped yourself 3 turns, 3 negative turns by losing a land drop, and then you had to foil the spell anyway because they could pay the 1 on the daze. So you actually lost 4 cards to counter 1 card. Do you know how bad that is? And that's what the Dreadnought deck does. So it's no wonder that he could not beat the Moneyball deck and lost 3-1 in a best of 5 matchup against Moneyball. Moneyball costs about $50 to build. Dreadnought costs about $1,400 to build. Which deck would you rather be playing? So Forbid, on the other hand, is a good card because the discard to optionally buy back Forbid is only used late game when you already have a Thieving Magpie or Ophidian or Shadow Mage Infiltrator, a permanent source of drawing an extra card every turn, in other words. And then you get a soft lock on your opponent because you counter every threat they play for the remainder of the game. So the buyback is optional on Forbid, and it only has a 3 mana cost. So Forbid is a 5-star card. Foil is a 0-star card. You should never put it in your deck. I know it looks tempting because you're playing it for free, but it's actually costing you everything. Daze isn't even that good. 2 mana for a 4 spike, or time walk yourself by 3 cards or 3 turns worth of land development. For a 4 spike. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Gush is really only good in Stasis and other prison decks. It's not good in a regular control deck. So basically, if a cantrip does not net you 2 cards for 1, it is not worth putting in your deck because you have to pay the mana to play it. So you're skipping your turn every time you play Portent or Opt or even Brainstorm, which is currently banned for no good reason in pre-modern. It's not even a good card because it puts 2 cards back on top of your deck and can land screw you. It's not even a good cantrip card. It can land screw you, whereas at least Opt and Sleight of Hand don't land screw you. So I don't know why they're banning Brainstorm because Brainstorm's actually weaker than Opt and Sleight of Hand. But if it does not net you 2 cards for 1, it is not worth playing in a control deck. The whole point of a control deck is to gain 2 for 1 card advantage by any means necessary. So a good cantrip is Accumulated Knowledge, although the first one is a tad expensive at 2 mana for 1 card. The second one is as good as Hymn to Turak. The third one is 50% better than Hymn to Turak. And the fourth one is up to twice as good as Hymn to Turak. Now, isn't it? So accumulated knowledge is good. The problem is your opponent can benefit from your accumulated knowledges, and whoever plays the first one dies. Because the other person plays 2 in a row and draws 5 cards. So I don't even know if accumulated knowledge is worth playing. It's definitely not worth playing in Psychotog because, you got to remove your graveyard. But the AI and some other players were like, when I posted the Draw Go deck, they're like, I've never even heard of those cards. The only 2 cards I've ever heard of in there, are mediocre, and the rest of them aren't that good. And I'm like, you have never played this game before, then, because Morphling is the best creature in pre-modern. For a long time, Morphling was the best creature ever printed. It's still the best creature in pre-modern. And Hypnotic Spectre is almost certainly the second best creature in pre-modern. And both of them will net you massive card advantage when you're playing them. Morphling because it beats just about anything else 1-on-1 or even 3-on-1 because it flies, it untaps, and it shrinks and expands, and it's untargetable. So, that's why it's used as the win condition in most blue decks that don't try to abuse something as dumb as Dreadnought. So the original Draw Go deck worked like this: 4 Morphlings, 4 Masticore, 4 and I didn't invent this deck, but I've played it before. 4 Thieving Magpie, 4 Powder Kegs, 4 Accumulated Knowledge, 4 Impulse, although I just got finished explaining why Impulse is not a good card. But that's just what it was. You draw your card and you say go. All right. And then the counters were Counterspell, Forbid, 4 Counterspell, 4 Forbid, and I have 4 Annul in mind because a cheap way to counter Dreadnought. but I don't know I don't remember exactly what the original was. But that would be 4 cards, 4 copies each of 9 cards, and then your land base is 16 islands, 4 Mishra's factories, and 4 fairy conclaves. All right. So the guy was arguing that elf decks are going to overwhelm you. No, they're not, because I have Powder Keg and Masticore, and on average, I will draw one or the other of them by the time I have the mana to play them. Elf decks absolutely get hosed by Masticore, and they're not very good against Powder Keg. But Masticore can kill an infinite number of elves in short order. In fact, by the time you cast it, the elf player may as well scoop and concede the game. Because the next turn they're going to lose 2 elves, and the turn after that they're going to lose 3 elves. Not counting the Masticore's attacking. Oh yeah, and the other thing you can do with that deck is you could actually put say 2 copies of Squee Goblin the Bob in the deck, and if you draw it out, you get to pay the Masticore's upkeep for free, or you get to pay the Forbid's buyback for free, especially if you draw both Squees. So it's a good reason to splash red into a draw go deck and play Counterburn. Is you get, or you don't even need the other spells. You just put 2 Squee Goblin and Bobs in there and play with 62 cards. And if you happen to draw the Squee at some point, you get to pay the Masticore's upkeep or half of the buyback. And if you draw both Squees, you're probably just going to win because you'll lock your opponent out of ever getting to play anything. But yeah, a card that costs you mana and then it only replaces itself in your hand with 1 card is a wasted card. You're spending your turn playing a card that does nothing. All right? When the game is all about math of how many threats and answers you can fit in your deck. And if you're spending 16 to as many as 20 of the cards in your deck just to draw cards, you don't have as many threats and answers in your deck as the other player. And then you're going to lose anyway, which is the problem with Psychotog and Dreadnought. It's also a problem with Miracle Growth. Because some versions of Miracle Grow, the only creature they have is the Quirion Dryad. So it's no different than Psychotog you or Dreadnought. You have no answers. You have no threats and you have no answers. The heck is wrong with the interface? They changed something and now I don't know how to end the video. Anyway, I'm going to end the video as soon as I figure out where. Oh, there it is. They moved the button. All right. So Hymn to Turak, very good. Brainstorm does not need to be banned. It's not even a good card.